I think that there are two major inflection points, if you will, to come into e-commerce. I don't know precisely when they come, but I do believe that these moments come. And the first moment is imminently here. A technology will emerge that is obviously AI enabled, that will be effectively the world's smartest, most sophisticated marketer that ever existed. And my company will have access to this thing. I will be able to connect this to my Shopify account and it'll be like, great, this is what you sell. And it will just be a marketing genius, not just in its ability to tell me what to do, but to literally go and execute these things. I think number two is the point at which you see full saturation of said technology. What does the world look like? It becomes in some ways so efficient that it likely yields a new era of like inefficiency that we don't yet understand really.
Tyler, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Jack. It's great to be on the show. I appreciate this.
I'm excited to have this conversation. There's so many things we could talk about. There's so many, oftentimes I do these shows. I'm like, hey, I got these few different things I want to talk to this person about.
Yeah.
Last time we talked, I came up with about 50 things I wanted to talk to you about. And then I read some of your articles online and some of the stuff that you've been posting. And I was like, now I have about 150 questions to ask you.
I love it. We got 100 things in 30 minutes. So let's get it done.
That sounds like a new podcast, 100 things in 30 minutes. I love that. I love that. Well, let's start from the top, kind of where you're at right now, and just letting people know if they don't know. Tell me about Saltbox.
Sure. So I started Saltbox back in 2019, and it was inspired by an experience I had. I bought an e-commerce business several years prior and realized both the joys, but also, the pretty extreme hardships of running a small logistically driven business, and was really inspired to try to, help solve some of those problems. And so we built Saltbox. So what we do is we develop and operate co-warehousing facilities across the country that provide, really highly functional micro warehousing spaces for small businesses. We also offer an embedded logistics services model, an embedded software model that helps to power our merchants shipping. And so you can think of it as kind of an all-in-one physical logistics solution for SMBs. And we've got about 1,000 customers today and a dozen locations across the country.
That's awesome. Now, I think from a starting point, if someone just didn't get it, someone would be like, oh, so that's like WeWork for warehouse, but it's so much more than that.
It is like that, and yet so much more. Right? I think the part that you can, we're okay to take from that analogy is, the flexibility and the comfort. Turns out people don't like running businesses in their spare bedrooms or basements or what have you. I think where it begins to differ is in the depth of the value proposition. I think the reality is if you're looking for, a quiet, comfortable place to work with Wi-Fi and coffee, you can find that in a lot of places, including your home. But if you're looking for, a place to, receive pallets of freight and, run, a really operationally intense business and not be alone, you have far fewer choices. And so Saltbox really comes through in that case.
How did you pick the locations that you launched to start the process?
It's a good question. I think the first one was, of course, just at home. And so I in 2016, moved to Atlanta, which is where I live now. And that's turned out to be a really wonderful market for us. But I think, and as I mentioned earlier, we've got 12 locations across, 9 states today. And what's interesting about the way that we choose where to put a Saltbox is typically when you're thinking about locating some sort of logistics kind of distribution hub or warehouse or what have you, you're really thinking about the proximity to ports or to train systems or to the end consumer or what have you.
Right.
In our case, I think reflecting our really very human-centric view towards who our customer is, we're thinking about how do we position Saltboxes as close to home as possible, where people want to live and work. And so we have a rule that we laugh about often, but we live quite true to it. It's the 5-minute Chick-fil-A rule. If it's not within 5 minutes of a Chick-fil-A, then it's probably not a good place for a Saltbox. And that's worked out pretty well for us.
Yeah, that's interesting. Expansion for a lot of companies, there's so many different strategies and go to market for things like that. But I always find it interesting, like the path, because that's obviously like one of those big questions, an ongoing question as you expand is like, what's next? Where would we go next? And really trying to understand that.
Yeah, as of course, the more we grow, the more signal we have about where to go, and we are increasingly investing in building community of small businesses beyond our four walls, and that gives us even more signal about where is that activity occurring and where is their demand. That being said, the reality is that as our economy is at the end of the day really powered by small businesses, and that means, among other things, that there are many of them everywhere. And so there are very few cities in America that I think we probably could not be successful in when you consider the breadth of the customers who operate within our facilities, and just how many of them exist in our country.
Can you tell me the moment where you just said, man, I got to solve this problem? I think everybody at one point in their journey, if they're an entrepreneur, founder, there's a moment where they're just like, I have to do this. I'm just compelled to do this.
Yeah,
that's how that happened to you.
It's a great question. And the first thing I would say is that, there's a moment when I decided that this problem needed to be solved and I wanted to do something about that.
Right.
And then there's a separate moment when I decided that I wanted to be the person to go and literally solve it. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's two very different things. But to your question, the moment of realization that the problem needed to be solved, I would say there were many incremental moments of pain. For example, having to, beg my family to come and help ship packages on Thanksgiving Day, right? Or, having to bribe the mailman, which I've done many times, or, having, to use our basement, for a makeshift warehouse and photo studio, right? These are all moments of saying, yeah, you know what, I think there's a problem here. But to be honest, I think that there was a literal moment of pain. It wasn't actually my pain, but an observation that I made. I'd met a woman who was running a small e-commerce company, and the business had an early successful start, but eventually became hampered by some growing pains. And as I dug in and tried to understand what was really happening, it became pretty clear to me that if she had Saltbox as I had envisioned it at that time, she probably would have been much better off. And I began to see this vision of what we wanted to build as something that could solve a real problem beyond me in a way that I understood, of course, but I think kind of seeing it viscerally in that way, and seeing the results of a failure in light of what I think could have been success was really the moment that made me say, this has to happen.
Yeah, I had similar moments for Collective Genius, and we went over evolution and things, but there was a time in Collective Genius where people were telling me, you need to go do this. Like, you're the right person to do this. And I was like, no, I don't want to do this. That sounds like a lot of work. I remember saying that exactly, like, create an operating system for high growth companies that works very well cross-functionally, specifically for companies that are doing things that have never been done before. Like, I knew it was a problem, and I kept on seeing all these other models and tools and how they just weren't addressing the problem over and over again. I knew it was a problem, but I really waited a long time before I just said, okay, I'm going to do this. And it was just because people kept on asking me to do it, or coming in and asking me to help. And I just kept on learning, and the pieces in the model just started coming together. And then eventually I was just like, I guess I'm doing this. I'm just all in. And I think, you and I both share this, a couple elements that are, I think, in our DNA is like entrepreneurship and community. And I've been around entrepreneurs my whole life growing up, and I remember going to college and finally figuring out like, oh, it's going to be entrepreneurship and finance that I was studying. And then I remember joining my first kind of like business entrepreneurial club. And I was like, oh, these are my people. Like people actually want to talk about business, because ever since I can remember, that's all I wanted to talk about. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, wow. I remember coming home and just being like, man, I found my people. This is so cool. Like, and it just energized me being around those people. And the fact that someone started this club in college, I was just like blown away by it and empowered by it. And I'm still connected in other groups with some of those same people now. And it's tremendous. But being a founder, being an entrepreneur, I think is a calling. I don't think many of us set out to be like, hey, I'm going to be the biggest geek about building cross-functional teams that are successul. Like, that doesn't make any sense unless looking backwards for me, right? And I think I see this a lot in our conversations, and stuff that you write about is that community is central to you, entrepreneurship is central to you. What is it that you think for you really drives wanting these entrepreneurs to succeed, especially these small business people? What is it? Is there something that you can remember or pinpoint back to something?
I think there probably are three kind of formative either experiences or ideas, beliefs rather, that really fuel my motivation to be an entrepreneur and to support entrepreneurs. I think the first thing is that early in life, I was exposed to entrepreneurship in a way that at that time I probably would not have been, or I was not acutely aware of, but that had a huge impact on me. My grandmother was both a laundromat operator. She ran this small laundromat, and I'd spend my days after school, finding a lot of ways to have fun in a laundromat, which is quite hard, but we did it. And she also ran she had a little Avon business, if you remember this thing, and my brother and I would help her pack the orders, and and the way it worked actually was quite interesting and reminiscent of what many of our customers do. She would get inventory from Avon, and it'd come in these big boxes, and we took one of our spare bedrooms and converted it into a little mini warehouse, and we would help package the shipments, and we were also the delivery guys. We would get in the back of my granddad's truck and drive around the neighborhood and hand these things out, and and so I think very formative memories of, you want to make some money, go and build a business. I think that the other thing that and so that's kind of the formative experience. I think the formative idea for me is that I am a zealot for fairness, and I think that there is this may be an overly harsh word. I think there's a fair amount of hypocrisy in the way that we talk about small business in America versus the way that we actually treat small businesses.
Right.
There are no shortage of, we love small business, bumper stickers and holidays, and marketing campaigns, these things, but I'm like, hey, why don't we just take all the money that we spend, celebrating small businesses, which is a lot, and just give it to them and invest in them, and maybe that actually will be a good thing. But I think that, one becomes tired of hearing how much you are appreciated and how critical you are to the economy, and how you get your own month of celebration. But when it comes time to get a loan or find a warehouse, it's not to be found. And so I just don't like that. And I think I've always seen myself as a bit of an outsider, a bit of an underdog, and I think that certainly is the plight of small businesses, and I think that just gives me a lot of motivation to pick up that flag and go for it.
Yeah, I love that, and like it's the underdogs that we want to help and support, and I really believe any good team, any business that really focuses on making a great team and doing something good, like has an opportunity to find their way to scale.
100%.
And I think more than ever now, there's more resources out there for these people. But you're so right. There's a lot of talk to help the small business, but there's not a lot of actual doing.
Yeah, even honestly, and I'll be critical here of, I've had the great, fortune of working within, some incredible venture-backed companies, and just, generally spending my entire career, in the mix of the, venture startup ecosystem. And, it's done tremendous things for the world. I acknowledge that, and I'm very appreciative of, those opportunities. At the same time, coming from where I come from, it's very easy to observe the discrepancy between the amount of, energy and capital and kind of, celebration that we attribute to, venture-backed tech companies, in contrast to how we think about small businesses, and their kind of shortcoming is that they're small. Collectively they're large and quite powerful, but individually they're quite small. And again, I think it just goes to this point of fairness. I recall, very acutely a feeling when I was, thinking of starting Saltbox. I remember, going to the WeWork or the local incubator, and I'd see a bunch of folks in there who were, notionally starting a company or running a small company, and they got the great free latte and really beautiful space. But in the reality, many of them just aren't doing very much. And in contrast, here I am, running a multi-million-dollar business out of a garage, because that's the best place that I can be. And again, you kind of see this this narrative of hypocrisy that applies to how we support these two types of companies. And I think that is fundamentally unfair, but I think more importantly is it's kind of an injustice to our economy and our goals to continue to truly encourage and support and enable SMBs.
Yeah. Well, we both share a little bit there, is the fact that we grew up around small businesses and really entrepreneurs. And for me, I saw some being very successful, but hitting a ceiling. I saw others just struggle day to day. And they basically had created, they had 5 jobs basically in this business that they're operating, and they're living day to day, month to month, trying to keep this thing going, and didn't really have the information or knowledge to know how to do things differently. And so I think I saw not only successes, but struggles, and, where they'd hit the ceiling on things. And then I jumped in, I started the business, and it worked very much small business in college, grew it pretty well and sold it. And then I jumped into venture-backed technology companies, and I was like, whoa, this is very different. And everything I learned in college, studied entrepreneurship, was teaching me to hit, base hit, singles, base hits, doubles, not trying to hit, grand slams, and the strategies used in venture are very different. And the amount of money that you have at your disposal is very different. And the pressure is very different. Like, there's a lot of different sides to that. But I think what I did for a while was learning as much as possible about the venture world and what people were doing, but then always kind of looking back and going like, how do you bridge this divide? Because these are two very separate worlds. And how do you bring these people, that are kind of limited and don't have the resources or the capital to bring them, to a place where some of these people are having success? You see a lot of Y Combinator's startups these days where these people get funded, they try it a little bit, and they're like, it's not going to work, and dump it. And then, these people get funding and try it and dump it. And it drives the seed investors crazy, because that's just a different mentality than it used to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I seen those two different sides. What drives you crazy about the e-commerce world today, and like what you see with the challenges that some of these small business e-commerce companies are having?
I think it is a continuation really of some of the pains that I mentioned earlier. I think that the capital in the context of kind of the e-commerce ecosystem, we've seen huge amounts of capital flow towards the building of the software infrastructure and kind of go-to-market solutions and such to power SMB commerce. And those things are all very important. I think what Shopify has built, for example, is incredible contribution to the success of these companies. At the same time, if you look at the way that e-commerce works at the largest scale, if you look at someone like Amazon, what you quickly realize is that the kind of secret, the engine of their business is not their go-to-market. It is not their brand. It is not particularly their checkout experience, right? It's their logistical sophistication and the infrastructure. The capital investment they've made in that infrastructure. These are the things that really make Amazon and give them this massive moat that they have in that space. And in contrast, if you engage a typical small business in a discussion around a small e-commerce company in a discussion about what are the fields of competition in their space, it's really quite rare that they would mention logistics as being one of those things. Mm-hmm. And I think that is in part informed by where the capital goes, right, and where the attention goes, and it does not go there. And I think that there's a a disservice at play in that. And so again, you see the efforts that we try to make to shift that narrative to say, look, it is really important to build a pretty website and build a really effective go-to-market strategy to understand your customer. You can't succeed without these things. But it's also the case that if you don't pay attention to the physical aspects of commerce, the logistics aspects of commerce, and as you are on a path to scaling, really master those things, you will struggle. And it can be a challenging message to get across because it is not the sexy place to invest. But, it's a critically important place to invest. And so I think that's kind of the big misconception that we're constantly pushing on with the market and our customers.
Yeah. Do you think these small e-commerce companies have a chance against like the Amazon of the world?
It's a great question. I actually very much do. However, I think that their chance, so to say, exists in a that chance is really I think anchored around their humanity as a small business, right? I mean, at the end of the day, what means we use this term small business? What we're really saying, if we're really saying, oh, there is, 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 people, who are selling this thing,
right?
And hopefully they're selling a thing that they have some passion about, right? That they have some meaningful connection to, some insight around. And I think that, to the extent that they are trying to compete, back 5 years from now with Amazon or whomever, and selling widgets in the marketplace, that's probably not going to work very well. Right. I think though that to the extent that they are, selling, a product that is uniquely rooted in, in who they are and kind of what they have to offer to the world, and they, develop a real strength in, conveying that message and telling that story, I think there's great success to be had. In fact, I think there's actually a lot more success to be had. I think that, as software, and maybe we should now say AI, eats more and more of the world, what is left? What is left but, the value of humanity, if you will. And so I think that the e-commerce companies that really, or anyone selling anything that lean into that, I think have a really bright future.
Yeah, that's one thing that I keep on coming back to myself is I feel like no matter how things change, humans will still want to connect with humans. And I think there'll always be curators that we follow, or people brands that we follow, or people that we trust their opinion on what we should buy or not buy. And, no matter how much software and AI eats the world, I do feel like humanity will still always embrace humanity.
Yeah, I hope so. I think, look, it's difficult to know, what the, future holds in full. And, I am, maybe a bit of a more of a futurist than anything else. I do believe probably some, some point of kind of true, integration, if you will. But I don't think that point is imminent, thankfully. And I think, to your point, on the journey there, two things really will dominate the future. One is the technology, which, let's call it AI, for now, but of course there's lots to that. And the other is, the human. And in many ways, you can kind of appreciate these things for just literally what they are, right? Like, there is a world where there are computers and there are humans. And, the question becomes, well, what, are you both uniquely good at? And I think that, kind of prognosis is that the computer will be more or less good at everything, except for, the most, intimate and authentic, and, kind of genuine and vulnerable aspects of humanity. And so I think that you can look to that as kind of, whatever you want to do in the future to create value in the world as a human, you can look to the very core of that which makes us human and that which, makes us, things, and you can do uniquely, as kind of inspiration, as a source for where to focus, and I think that actually becomes the more, we see the computer, so to say, rise, the more I think value there is on, the notion of human connection and humanity. And, I'm really actually quite excited about that future.
You're passionate about equity. When it comes to AI right now, I mean, I'm kind of starting to see a pretty big divide starting between the people that know how to use it, what it is, the value of it, and some people that don't. And I feel like that divide's going to probably become greater and greater. What's your belief on that?
Yeah, I think that's a near certainty, absent some sort of, untold intervention. I think that one of the things that is just to the point of that divide that is most interesting to me about this moment in time is, history gives a lot of lessons on what kind of at least at a conceptual level is likely to happen here. But they're lessons that I think as a society we are hesitant to engage with and let alone accept. And so let me explain what I mean by that. If you go back through time and you look at essentially any point of any kind of major revolution, kind of technological or progressive advancement of, in society, whether it's the agrarian revolution or it's the agricultural revolution or certainly the industrial revolution, etc. I think there are kind of two kind of foundational attributes of these moments in time. The first is that at some point in the future, removed from the kind of point of inflection, if you will. So let's say 2022 was a point of inflection here. At some point in the future, it is true that to some degree every human on Earth benefits from that revolution. Right today, every human on Earth to some degree benefits from the agricultural revolution. Right, and now differing degrees, but to some degree. And it would be in no human's interest to unwind that revolution. We can all agree on that. Nobody wants that world. It sounds dystopian in many ways, right? The other thing that I think is a universal truth about those moments in time is that at the inflection point, you can think of it as almost a kind of an earthquake, of sorts, right? There's a breaking point in society. There are people if you envision that moment, who are on, let's call it the right side and the wrong side of that fracture, that occurs in Earth. And the people on the wrong side, tend to, to varying degrees, suffer, right, or not benefit. And the people on the right side in that moment of inflection tend to benefit greatly, because they have, the power of, that this revolution has provided, and they can, use that, to their significant advantage. And so, I think that perhaps where we are today is, we can see that line. That line is there. That line, that crack was formed, let's call it 2 years ago. And now it is winding, and, at some point it's going to become really quite difficult to jump over that crack. It's going to be a little bit too far.
Right.
And so I think that, and it stands to reason actually that, this revolution, if you will, the AI revolution, will be even more powerful, than past, and certainly it'll be faster. And so this creates, really, I think, worrisome conditions, right? Where, to your point, there will be people who, benefit and people who don't, and I think that could be, quite extreme, for some period of time. And I think there's a lot of risk that is encapsulated in that.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's going to be interesting to see, and hopefully we can get more people on the correct side of the divide.
Right. I think if there's one thing that I would love to see, the powers that be doing today, it is a simple, literal awareness campaign, just to say, hey, let me tell you what is happening here, and let me tell you,
right,
why you should consider investing, 10 hours of your time, no matter who you are, to understand the nature of this and to understand, the potential stakes, so that you can make an informed decision about, whether you believe this or not, and to what extent
right,
you're going to, invest yourself into getting on the right side of it. And I think the worst outcome is one where, not only do, large swaths of people, end up on the wrong side, but they end up there really never having even been made aware, of what was occurring. And I think that is, the current state of the world for a lot of people. And I think that's really unfortunate.
Yeah. And then looking back at history, you see others that they play a role in making that bridge and getting people over, throughout different times. And I think that's probably on all of us.
It puts you in a tricky situation, right? I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Don't Look Up, but it's a great movie on Netflix.
Oh yeah. I did see that movie. Yeah.
Forget the guy's name, but anyway, this asteroid is coming for Earth, and they're kind of running around like, hey, there's an asteroid coming, we gotta do something. And a bit different situation, because obviously the asteroid is really quite bad.
Yeah.
And there's not much you can do really.
But everybody ignores them, right? Everyone completely ignores them. Yeah.
And this is, I think that part of it to me is the most fascinating part of that movie, and I think is the behavior that reflects the current reality, which is when we encounter claims of change that are so significant that we don't know what to do with them. If we just simply look the other way,
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine if whether it was President Harris or President Trump, if either of them went out to the world and said, hey, I got some news for you. This AI thing is coming. It is going to be in the good news is in the long term, it's going to be good for everyone, right? Your great grandkids, they're gonna love AI and all that it does for the world. But for some of you, it's going to be really great for some of you. It's going to be really quite bad for some of you. Some of you are going to lose jobs, etc. People would say, well, I don't want that. Can you stop that from happening? And they'd say, nope, I can't do that. It is what it is. And that would be an extremely disconcerting message for people, right? No president wants to deliver that message, but that's the reality, And so I think that the sooner we can begin to grapple with the likely, reality of what AI means for, let's just say this country and our society, the better.
Right.
I think, unfortunately, we probably won't really be able to grapple with it to the degree that we need to until we begin to really see its disruptive effects.
Right.
Kind of like that movie. The moment when everyone really started to, hug each other and say their goodbyes is when they could literally see the asteroid in the sky, and not much time left at that point. But
Right.
gross.
Yeah, some of it will come down to the natural process in which things happen and go through, right? But you can understand where it's going and invest in the process. Kind of on that thread, thinking about the future, like how do you see the future of e-commerce unfolding?
Give me a horizon, because it's it can vary. Which horizon are we talking about here?
Well, from your perspective of what you're building, and
Maybe a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year horizon.
Oh, I see what you're saying. A 10-year horizon. Walk me through the 3, 5, and 10 in a brief way.
I think that there are two major inflection points, if you will, to come into e-commerce in the coming years. I don't know precisely when they come, but I do believe that these moments come. And interestingly, I don't know what either of them mean, but nonetheless, here we go. I think the first moment is that, imminently here, it could be any week, any month now, a technology will emerge that is obviously, AI enabled, that will be, effectively the world's, smartest, most sophisticated, marketer that ever existed, right? And my company will have access to this thing. I will be able to connect this to my Shopify account, and it'll be like, great, this is what you sell, and here's the customers, and right, and it will just be a marketing genius, not just in its ability to tell me what to do, but to literally go and execute these things.
Right
now, that'll be great for me, and I hope that I and every Saltbox customer is an early adopter of that product, because we will just have a field day, right? Just crushing our competition. That's number one. So an era of extreme kind of dislocation, if you will. I think number two is a point at which you see full saturation of said technology, right? What does the world look like when every product, right? The marketing behind that is driven by a all-knowing AI. And it's quite interesting to contemplate what it looks like. I mean, it becomes in some ways so efficient that it likely yields a new era of like inefficiency that we don't yet understand, really. I don't, and then I think the last piece is essentially what happens when the same thing becomes true with the physical labor. Today, obviously, world of commerce depends heavily on humans to, get things where they're going. At some point, the cost of robotics will be so low that it will do all that. And, these two things combined, essentially mean that, you can, that first and foremost, like the AI will be able to, with great precision and scale, target and sell every product, every person they want to, with it in a way that we don't fully appreciate. And it will be able to send that command to the warehouse, which will be able to get it there at, very low cost. And, I think it's, I don't know, I don't know what happens beyond that. But I think all those things happen in a 10-year window.
Yeah. And that's an interesting picture, because then I can see it telling you what it should make and then just making it as well.
Exactly. Right? And then if it just tells you what it could make, and I don't know. I think that it's at a certain point, the kind of the foundational principles of how we consume, right, change. Right? Do I want to consume? It turns out when you give a kid take your kid to the ice cream shop and be like, hey, you can have all that you want. My kid, a scoop and a half, he's full. You can't do it.
Right.
And so I don't know, but I think what's most interesting, and whether this is true whether we're talking about e-commerce or literally any other endeavor in the world, I think that period of kind of dislocation where, I forget who made this quote, but there's some famous quote that, that the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. And those words are precisely perfect for this moment in time, and I think will remain perfect to describe, the next several years. And so, in whatever domain you are operating, you today have the ability to reach into the future and to, leverage the tools the future offers to have an extremely unfair advantage against your competition. And that is a, really fascinating and really opportunistic period of time. And that's where we are right now. And I think at some point that time will end, as measured by essentially, complete adoption of these things. And what's on the other side of that, that's for the futurists to ponder. I don't know.
That's really interesting. That's an interesting view of the world and so true. And I love the idea of like thinking the future is now and how to leverage that in the best ways. And keeping on this e-commerce thread, I think it was Bezos talks a lot about investing in the things that you feel will never go away. I don't know if you've seen that quote or that video. People have been playing it all the time. And I really like the idea of that too. It's like, there are things that we know that will never change. And if we're going to really define down to like what we should really invest in.
What's an example? I don't know that. I don't know that. I mean, there certainly is a horizon, right, of time.
Yeah, I think if humanity is in question, then maybe things will. There are things that you may not.
Well, I think it is. I don't think there's any utility in us, mere humans today, pondering this, except for fun. If you like such things, it can be enjoyable to, think about, that future. But like, I think my view of the world is, that it is impossible to know, right? If you take yourself back to imagine it's, the late 1800s and, Thomas Edison is like revealing this light bulb to you, and for the first time you see light, and you are a smart person and you begin to say, oh man, like, let me ponder what light will do for the world. Let me ponder what electricity will do for the world. Even the greatest genius of that time,
right?
You and I can appreciate, would have virtually no ability to anticipate the impact that electricity would have on the world. There's no ability, right?
Right.
And so what makes us think that we here to now can do this, right?
Right.
I think there's a good reason to believe that. I think that's
a good
really
point.
Believe. So,
Yeah.
I think that there's a knowable kind of horizon within reason, right, that kind of operates still on the same foundational principles that the world works today. And there's an unknowable horizon. We don't know what that point is. We'll know when we get there, I suppose. But, my encouragement to everyone is to take great advantage of this moment in time where the world, by and large, still operates on the same, foundational principles and economic designs and so on and so forth. Because at some point, those things are very likely to change. And it is unknown whether those changes will benefit you or not.
We can only see so far.
And that's, if there's one thing to know in this moment in time, it is that, right? And focus on, where you can see today. I mean, imagine trying to raise. Imagine you had a baby just born now. In every, for the past 100 years, let's say, like, we have known, we've been reasonably capable of anticipating accurately, what their 18 years will look like. I think if you have a 1-year-old today and you're trying to envision an 18-year future, I think the answer is, I have no freaking idea. Right? I don't know. All I know is it's going to be vastly different from what it is.
Right.
And this is really the first time in, a very, very long time. And that's been, I think, as true as it is today.
Well, I always think of it as, unless you know everything, you know nothing.
Yeah.
Unless you know everything, you know nothing. Because just one little piece of information could drop the whole deck of cards, right? And so for someone that's raised 5 kids and still raising them till ever, I think one thing I would always go back to is just trying to make them good people. And I'd hope that humanity gets to play a role in this in the future, and the good people are playing those roles the right way.
I think so. I think it will. I think the point at which it does not is a point that we don't have to concern ourselves with.
Right.
It's a new world, but until then, I think it matters. And I think the other thing I would say, just on the topic of kids, and what ought you do now to prepare kids. What am I doing to prepare my almost 11-year-old son? Is teach them how to think. I think that it is clear now that the AI will do the work. That's very, very clear. It's clear now that there is virtually no value in kind of the possession of knowledge. The AI can do these things. I think it is equally clear that what is becoming most valuable is the ability to know how to direct this all-knowing thing. There in the future, there will be ASI humanoids, right? Who may be one sitting right here, and I'll be able to look over to it, and I might say, "Hey, what's on your mind?" Nothing. What do you think about the game? That was good, right? Can you please go and make me $1 billion right now? Yeah, I could do that. So people knowing how to think, right, and all that entails. I think it is, in my view, pretty clearly going to be the kind of the defining quality of the future. That and knowing how to be a good human, and knowing what are those things which make us uniquely humans and make us uniquely good and attractive, likable, right, reliable. I think these are the things that will matter.
Like always, so well said. Well, we started this conversation and I had 100 things to talk to you about. Now I have about 200 as we close the conversation. But I do have one final question to ask you. The final question is a scenario, really important scenario. You are trapped on a desert island the rest of your life. You have everything you need. You have food, water. I don't know if you have AI. We're going to leave that one out of the equation. I'll say healthcare. You got everything you need.
I would not be stuck with AI. I'd get off.
So Tyler, you got everything you need, but the one thing you don't have is entertainment. There is no entertainment on this island at all. Luckily for you, an old 80s boombox drifts ashore with unlimited batteries. You can only bring one album with you to listen to the rest of your life. Any era, even though this is an 80s boombox, any era, one album, what are you going to bring?
Well, I would say it would have to be something without words, because I just think, hearing any one person's voice would get old. It'd be some sort of classical music, because I can experience it in different ways. I think it would probably be maybe Rachmaninoff's piano preludes, which is just a really beautiful collection of I think 24 preludes and lots of different motions and for different days. And I think for that. Yeah,
that's a great answer. That's a great answer. I love that answer.
I think I'm always trying to optimize. So that's
you thought through really quick and just narrowed that down. I love the idea of having different, because you do go through different days and different.
Yeah, you need different emotions. That's key. And no one's nagging voice, because it's both. Yeah, it's both.
That's awesome. That's an awesome answer. All right. Well, thanks for joining me on the show. I appreciate having you on, and I hope we can have more of these conversations in the future.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.